Okay, welcome to segment 6.9. Okay, the final point, as I said in the last segment, suppose you had a case like this. So all the legislators moved, say, 1 point higher in their scores. And then if that happened, our scores would say, oh, that must have been all due to the scale shifting, not because the legislators genuinely had a change in ideology. And our method would miss what could possibly be a true change in ideology. Okay. So some people at the time criticized that and said, look, for that reason, if you really want to measure ideology, the better thing to do is just look at the nominal scores. Just assume that the interest groups try to make their scales so that their scales are fixed over time. By the way, side note, I happened to be at this conference and I happened to notice they had this sign up, said something like 50th anniversary of the ADA. I couldn't believe this. The Americans for Democratic Action. We're meeting in the same hotel room where hotel where I was staying. And I started asking around. I said, is there anyone who is involved with the scores? And they finally showed me someone. I think it's like director of press relations. I can't remember his name. So I just talked to him. I bet for 20 or 30 minutes in the kind of lobby of the hotel. And I just tried to pester him every way. Here's a way that legislators' scores could go up over time because you made the scores easier to vote on the liberal side one year versus another, and tried to see, what did he do anything to set the scales or set the roll call votes so that wouldn't be a problem, or tried to set the scales so that some legislator that they thought was constant kept the same score. Tried to give him cues, like give me something to say they're setting the scale, and nothing. Every question I asked, said nope, all we do every year is we pick the 20 issues that we think are the most important to liberal cause, and that's what we pick. And so for that reason, I think it's very, very possible that the scales are going to change from year to year. They're not trying to keep the scales constant. So that's one anecdote. Okay, but now what if you believe the alternative, that really you don't need to adjust these scores? There's no such thing as scale shifting, and really the nominal scores are the better way to measure ideology. Okay, now those are maybe two extreme theories. One, our method, which would say, that one case I just showed you would assume that all of the change is due to the scales, whereas the other method, just using nominal scores, would say all of the change is due to true change in the legislator's heart. What if we had a horse race between those two theories? Okay, so maybe the truth is something in between, but let's say, what if the only possibilities were either the extreme version, our paper, or the extreme version of the other theory? We thought, hey, maybe there's a way to test this. We said, well, if all the interest groups are trying to keep their scales the same, then the conservative alternative to the ADA. Now, at one point, it was the Americans for Constitutional Action. They quit giving scores, I think sometimes like late 70s. But so instead, there's another group called the American Conservative Union, and that's probably the leading conservative interest group for giving these scores. So what we did is we said, well, okay, let's take 100 minus the ACU score, and that should be a good measure of liberalness. And if the ACU is keeping their scales constant and the ADA is keeping their scales constant, then the nominal scores from those two measures should move in tandem. Okay, so when the average ADA score goes up, then that secondary measure, 100 minus the ACU score, that also should go up if true. And now our theory, though, Grosskreutz-Levitt-Snyder says, well, maybe not. Maybe if it's just random scales measured, that you could have them moving in opposite directions. And so what we did for our horse race, we said, okay, let's look at um, uh, the nominal scores, okay, for ADA and 100 minus ACU, and let's take the average score for every year, okay, and then let's graph the difference, how that average score changes over time, and what the difference looks like, and that's it. So you can see so when we said nominal ACU, we actually meant 100 minus the nominal ACU. And you can see they're kind of random. When one goes up, the other could go down. Okay, so I would argue this is some evidence that the nominal scores for the two groups are not moving in tandem. Meanwhile, we did the other version. We said, well, what if we look at the adjusted scores of both groups, use our method, take out what we say are the scale changes, get the adjusted average score, then our method would say, well, the scores of the two different interest groups should move in tandem, and then we show it in this graph. So here they go, and I would argue here they're almost, some years they're almost exactly the same when they go up like here, when they go up 4 points, when they show, what is it, 6, when they become 6.5 points more liberal on the ADA scale, they become 5.5 more liberals on the ACU scales. In some years, their change is exactly the same. So when we do this horse race, our theory says these two lines should move in tandem. The other theory says that these two lines in this graph should move in tandem. So at least when you do the strong versions of each theory, I'd argue that this is like pretty, to me, convincing evidence that nominal scores are not the correct way to measure ideology. Maybe there really is some change of scales from year to year that these interest groups are doing. Okay. That's all. Okay, so that's all for this session. Normally, I would talk about next week's paper, but to what I'm not, the next session. So this is session 6. Session 7 is going to be a midterm. So our next lecture will be session 8. So I'll wait before I start introducing the material there. And then I guess I'll probably see many of you in person and maybe answer questions about potential midterm. Be sure to notice that I posted a sample midterm onto the class's Dropbox page. And what else? Be sure to notice, I'm not sure if I said that... there's a handout, a set of pages for this lecture. Hope everyone saw that. So some of the things I showed on the screen, I've posted those to Dropbox. Okay, so I've now finished session 6. Okay, probably start studying for the midterm and see you in a couple weeks for the session 8 lectures. Okay, see you then.